Hello, high school writing students. We are starting a new quarter today, and it's going to be quarter 2, lesson 1. And this whole quarter is going to be about narrative writing. So what I'm going to do in lesson 1 is start you off with a basic narrative paragraph. This is just one paragraph in a very specific narrative form. So hopefully you can follow along in this lesson and do the writing assignment, which is going to be one paragraph, about 10 to 20 sentences. And then as we progress through the quarter, I will have you do multiple paragraphs. So follow along in the lessons book as I read for lesson 1, Intro to Narrative Writing. The biblical principle is storytelling is a great way to make truth easy to understand. That's the whole point of this lesson. The goal is to write a narrative paragraph that reflects God's truth clearly and coherently. So hopefully when you write clearly and coherently, it'll be easy for the reader to understand. So I want to start off with talking about the biblical worldview of narrative writing. This is slightly different than the informative writing because narrative is a story. I put the questions here. What is narrative writing, in case you didn't know? What is the biblical foundation for narrative writing? And why is narrative writing important? So all of these concepts are important to know when writing narratives. A narrative is a story, the recital of a story, or a continued account of the particulars of an event. And that's taken straight from Webster's 1828 dictionary, which you can access online if you don't have your own. Narrative writing and storytelling are God's original ideas. He wrote, that's God, wrote the greatest narrative of all time with the most profound ideas ever written. More than half of the Bible is a narrative, and it provides great examples of narrative writing. God modeled the purpose for narrative writing and how to best communicate stories that bring truth and hope to this world. To emulate God's writing style of storytelling is the most important way we could write. Writing God's way with His ideas can bring truth and hope to the world. So you're going to take some time to read Luke chapter 1, verses 1 through 4, Psalm 78, and Matthew 13, 10 to 13. And I want you to think about these questions that I posed here. What else do you learn about the biblical worldview of narrative writing from those passages? Does understanding come naturally to everyone? The next question is, how can stories make it easier for people to understand truth? The disciples asked why Jesus was teaching them in parables, because he hadn't talked to them in parables. Jesus taught in parables because parables were easy to understand, they were familiar and memorable. The people hadn't been taught the mysteries of God, so he had to make it easy for them. Write your answers on your assignment, or anywhere else for that matter. So this is an important exercise here to get the right mindset for God's purpose for writing stories. All right, now we're going to look at the skill. The purpose of narrative writing is to entertain or engage the audience with truth. A basic narrative paragraph has 4 parts. So here's an introduction to narrative writing. A narrative is not a narrative if it doesn't have characters, a setting, a plot, and theme or message. Unlike an informative type of writing with a topic and details, all narratives have all 4 of these components. Good writers develop the personality and personal traits of each of the characters. This makes them come alive and seem relatable. Good writers also develop a setting because the setting of the story defines what the characters can do. Another part of what good writers do in narratives is to have plots that describe the details of a problem and a solution from the beginning to the end. This part will be the longest part of a narrative. Lastly, the story should have a theme or message that is principled. And what that means is it should have a message that is honoring to God. The way you add theme is by making sure the ending is a happy one in which one of the characters display good character. When you have all these components in your narrative, the story will be easy to understand. It will also be engaging and entertaining. Now let's get into the basic narrative paragraph. This is not a whole essay. This is just one paragraph, and that's the focus of this lesson. So I'm going to outline for you what a basic narrative paragraph is and all the components that it's supposed to have. So the basic narrative paragraph starts with an introduction using one of the introductory sentence frames. And this makes writing a narrative a lot easier because there's going to be students out there that don't like to write a narrative type of writing like myself, but I make it easy for you so that it can be done well, even if you don't like it. One of the introductory sentence frames is once upon a time. That's so common, so easy. So you could use that, or you could use one blank day, or you could use it was blank day in a blank place when the certain character did something. In this introductory part, you're also going to include a short description of the name or names of the character or characters, what they look like, and what kind of person they are, what their qualities are, what their talents are, maybe certain things they might know. It also includes a short description of the setting. So the setting is not just location or time, but it could also be the month or the season or the year. Here are some examples of the introduction part of the narrative paragraph. Once upon a time in the cold mountains of Colorado, a young boy was helping his mother out of the car because she had broken her leg this past winter in a ski accident. Now that has a lot of details. That starts with once upon a time. It's got the setting of Colorado, but not just in the state of Colorado, but in the mountains where it is cold. And then we have the characters, a young boy, and what he was doing, which tells us what kind of person he is. So he's a helpful person. He cares about his mom. So that means he's caring. And it tells a little bit about what happened to introduce the story. Basically, his mom had broken her leg. So I got all those details in one sentence. Now you could break it up and make it into two sentences. That would be fine too. The second example says, one day while hiking in the jungles of Africa on a hot summer day, Ashlyn saw an injured rabbit on the ground. So in this case, we start the sentence with one day, and then we start it with while hiking, which is what the characters are doing. And then we put jungles of Africa. So that tells us where it is and what part of Africa it's in. And it's a hot summer day. It's not a cold winter day. It's not the fall. And then we have our character and what she did. Now, this doesn't tell exactly what kind of person she is, although it might tell us that she likes animals because she noticed this injured rabbit. And that's the introduction to that particular story. The next example, number 3, it was a cool, crisp morning on the yacht near the shore of the Gulf of Mexico when Max and Randy thought of a great business idea. Their whole life, they had dreamed of starting their own business. Now that they were living on their own, they could fulfill their dreams. So this has 3 sentences, but I have started the paragraph with it was, and that's one of the sentence frames that we see right here. And then we see the setting. It's a cool, crisp morning, and they're on the shore in the Gulf of Mexico, and they're in a yacht, more specifically. So lots of details there when it comes to the setting. And then we have our characters, Max and Randy. They thought of a great business idea, which introduces us to what they're going to do and also tells us they are business people. They're not artists or anything else. And then it starts to talk about a little bit about them, telling us that they dreamed their whole life of starting a business. And you can see a little bit about the theme coming about because it says they could fulfill their dreams. The message could be something about following your dreams. So now we're going to move into the first part of the plot. Now you might have already introduced your plot in the first few sentences, but this is the major part of your plot called the body. And this is where you're going to develop the plot, giving careful thought into what is going on and how the plot will resolve a problem or challenge. And here's some examples for that. Now, this particular example is going to be a continuation of example number 3 that we had in the previous bullet point up here. So I start off by repeating the same introductory sentence or introductory parts. And then I talk about they wanted to give tours of the shore and give customers a memorable experience with several water excursions. And the first thing they decided to do was see if they could get an investor to help pay for a boat and advertising. So here we have the beginning of the plot, which is that they need to look for an investor to help them start their business. Let's read on. Next, they both brainstorm ideas for explaining their business to investors and shared it with several people. More and more people seemed interested, but no one wanted to make a commitment for several months. Discouragement came over both of them, but they never gave up. So you can see that the plot further develops from them getting to an investor to explaining their idea to different investors. And then we have this introduction of the problem that they couldn't get anyone to commit and they were discouraged. Those are the problems that they were having. But then another little hint to the theme, which is they never gave up. And that's a great message. So let's see how this theme further develops in the conclusion. So the last part of a basic narrative paragraph is the conclusion. And this conclusion gives a closing to the challenge or problem. It includes the time period, the solution to the problem, which is the most important part, and added details other than the basic idea that there was a solution. It describes exactly what the solution is. And here are some examples. And again, I'm continuing this story with Max and Randy. And it says, after waiting 6 months and giving many more presentations, they finally found an investor who not only gave them enough money for a boat and advertising, but also gave them the advice they needed. So here we have a happy ending. People are giving them advice, so that means that they receive advice, they're humble. And then there's kind of like the miracle of them finding an investor because they had the problem of not having one. And they never gave up because they kept giving more and more presentations. So as you can see, the plot of this story comes to an end and it's positive. So on the next page, you'll find your assignment and it says, this week's assignment is to write one paragraph about the story of Jonah in the Old Testament. It should be 10 to 20 sentences long. You're going to have one introductory sentence, 1 to 2 character description sentences, 1 to 2 setting description sentences, 6 to 8 plot sentences, and 2 to 3 concluding sentences. In my sample paragraph, which we're going to see below, we'll have to count the sentences that I actually put in there. So you're going to read the book of Jonah from the Bible and write down some notes on the writing assignment handout and organize those notes into a good storyline with a problem and a solution. Then write a rough draft of your essay. Check the grading and reflection section to improve your writing. Share it with your parents or writing instructor for feedback. So here in this middle section here, you can see an example of a narrative paragraph and the comments that I put on the side so you can see how the story develops. And then at the bottom, I put the whole paragraph about Jonathan and Franklin. So this is actually not the paragraph that I was thinking of where I talk about Max and Randy. You pretty much have that paragraph in this description here, but I show you another example. I listed what my characters were, what the setting is, and what my plot is, beginning, middle, and end. and then I write it into sentence form. So that's for you to look at and read for yourself. And you can see how a basic paragraph, narrative paragraph works. And hopefully you'll be able to write one about Jonah. All the facts and details that you need for that story are in the Bible. And so take a day or so to read that and figure out what points you want to put in your essay. So that's it for lesson 1 of quarter 2, all about narrative writing and the basic narrative paragraph. And remember, storytelling is a great way to make truth easy to understand. So make sure you are thinking about what your message is and communicating clearly and coherently. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in lesson 2.